next few months are also going to be really tough for our economy unless we have more action from Washington. Back in March, Congress came together in a bipartisan way to pass the CARES Act. It was not a perfect bill, but it kept 12 million people in this country from slipping into poverty. It kept food on the table for millions of Americans. It saved a lot of small businesses from extinction. But that bill was only meant to serve as a bridge through July when we hope to have a better handle on the virus. That obviously didn't happen, but instead of coming together to pass a new package, the administration and Senate Majority Leader McConnell took a wait and see approach. 5 months later, the pandemic is worse than it's ever been, and it means our workers, families, and small businesses are in for a very hard winter. If we don't act, it's going to be even more difficult. Many small businesses, many people are hanging by their fingernails to survive. Small businesses are running out of cash. In Colorado, weekly unemployment claims are rising once again. They're now roughly 7 times higher than they were before the crisis began. Nationally, we're still down more than 10 million jobs from February. For perspective, that's more jobs than we lost in the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009. On top of that, we're also headed toward a so-called benefits cliff at the end of the year when federal relief for student loans, evictions, and enhanced unemployment are all set to expire. If that happens, Washington is going to throw 12 million people into a financial crisis all across America, including 122,000 people in Colorado. All of that is to say failure is not an option. The Senate needs to pass a new relief package, and I'm going to be pushing very hard to make sure that it includes 4 priorities that are the same ones that I've been fighting for since the summer. First, we need to surge our community health efforts for testing, contact tracing, and public health support so we're in a position to get everyone vaccinated as soon as possible. I have a bill with Senator Gillibrand to do that by training hundreds of thousands of people for a new health force that would boost our public health capacity at the local level. A version of that bill already passed the House. Second, we need to keep the hardest hit small businesses afloat until we're on the other side of the pandemic. PPP was an attempt to do that. With the first bill, I think that the Restart Act that I wrote with Senator Todd Young of Indiana could do an even better job, and it now has 59 bipartisan co-sponsors in the Senate. But whatever bill we end up doing, we've got to do more for small business to get them through this period of time between now and 6 months from now when things are going to be, I think, dramatically improved. Third, we have to extend the enhanced unemployment benefits so families have a lifeline until the economy recovers. I've proposed a number of bills to do that, and I think that there's renewed understanding on both parties' part that this is something that we need to do. And finally, we need to worry that state and local governments are going to hemorrhage jobs and compound the economic difficulties that we're facing if we don't provide them some fiscal relief to fill the massive holes in the budget that's been created by the pandemic. I'm grateful for what Governor Polis and the state legislature did this week to provide Coloradans with emergency relief. They're doing everything they can to help, but it's not going to be enough without federal support. Washington needs to act. We have to create a bridge for our healthcare system, small businesses, families, state and local governments to keep their heads above water until we get to the other side of this pandemic. And if we come together in a bipartisan way and do what we need to do, like we did back in March, I'm confident that we will. With that, let me stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has on any topic.
Thanks. If you have a question, please type your name in the chat and I can unmute you.
Oh, Senator.
Hey, Charles.
How are you,
How
sir?
are you?
I'm okay.
Well, it's good to see you.
So I know that they've been talking, Pelosi and the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate about a package coming in. How close do you think they are to getting something done? And what would it focus on?
I think that this week I was back in DC, and you could see the pressure build throughout the week. People talking to leadership saying that we can't, we have to act. Matters are getting worse. They're worse today than they have been throughout the crisis. And I think there's an understanding on the part of the leadership, including, it seems, even McConnell, that we've got to do something. And that something's going to have to include preserving some form of the enhanced UI benefits, the unemployment benefits. It's going to have to include something to bridge small businesses through the winter, especially our hardest hit businesses, the ones that have been closed because of orders keeping people at home or reducing the numbers of people that can congregate. And I think there's broad bipartisan support for both of those things. In addition, we need a public health infrastructure, a backstop for our public health infrastructure, so we can actually get the vaccinations out to the American people, and in the meantime, do the contact tracing that needs to be done. I have a version of that bill. The House passed a version of that bill, but I would expect any bill that would be successful to be something that would help reinforce our public health infrastructure. And then the final point, and it's really a difficult sticking point, is this question of how to support state and local governments. The Republicans have been dead set against that, and we continue to push for it, and we'll just have to see what happens in the coming week.
So I've been following the pandemic money, the PUA money that's been coming, and as you pointed out, it's going to expire at the end of this year. That seems to be, I'm sure you're aware, is fraught with fraud. I don't know how much money has been wasted going to people who didn't deserve to get it. If there is going to be a resurgence of the PUA, is there going to be some better guardrails on that so that the pandemic?
Are you talking about the unemployment insurance, or are you
right.
talking about the what?
The unemployment insurance for gig workers and part-time and self-employed workers.
Yeah, well, obviously nobody's interested in having people that aren't entitled to it get it, and we got to make sure that the safeguards are in place, and that the transparency is in place, and that the Congress does the oversight that's required to do that. And we need to do it, and we need to do it for money that's already gone out. We need to do it for money that's going to go out later. But it's also critically important for us to get it out to because it's not just that it helps families and workers that have been displaced. It helps our entire economy. That program has represented $4 billion of economic activity in Colorado since last March. And I shudder to think what our economy would look like today if we hadn't done that.
And finally, and I'll let you go. So
Sure.
Like the special session that the Colorado just did, is this new package going to focus on getting the country through the next 4 months? And are you looking at another package next year? Is that the intent here?
I think that is the intent. I mean, I heard some very positive things this week from the Biden transition team about where they thought we were going to be by next May in terms of vaccinations being deployed, and the ability to begin to get back to some semblance of a normal life. And so we've got to buy some time between the next 4 to 6 months to be able to get to that point. And this package, I think, will do that. It won't be the last thing that we do, I'm sure, but it's really, I had a Republican colleague say to me in the hallway this week that any dollar that we spend right now will be twice as effective as any dollar that we spend in March. I think that's actually not only true, but it's probably true that any dollar we spend now will be 5 times more effective today than in March, because the carnage that's going to occur to working families and to small businesses if we don't put a floor underneath them is going to mean that we could create an economic downturn that it will take us years to recover from, rather than being in this position where we can just get through the next 4 to 6 months and then see the economy lift off, which I expect that it will.
Thank you, sir. It's always good to talk to you.
Thanks, Charles. Good to see you.
Thanks, Charles. Next, we have Caitlin Kim from Colorado Public Radio.
Hi, thanks for doing this, Senator. I have getting back to the bipartisan proposal that was introduced earlier this week. It doesn't include all 4 of your priorities. So I want to know, would you support that proposal if it goes forward, as a stopgap measure into a Biden administration where restart the health force might be considered then? And do you think it will be part of an omnibus or a CR or something like that? Do you expect to see COVID relief put into the larger government?
I certainly would support it. The package that has been negotiated, I hope we can do better than that, but I definitely would support it. And there will be. I think this won't be the last moment when we're trying to figure out how to support, for example, our public health workers out in the field. It could be part of the appropriations bills that go through, and I think that might be a useful vehicle from the Republicans' perspective. For some reason, I think they'd like to attach this to something larger going through. So we'll just have to see. I think we'll know a lot this week. The good news, I'll say this, Caitlin, the good news is I went to Washington last week pretty pessimistic about where things were because of McConnell was so negative about any attempt to do anything. By the end of the week, it became clear that he was having to listen to people, I assume in his caucus, or maybe people from Kentucky, say times are about to get very, very tough here. And, the Senate should not go home for a recess until we do our job. And that means passing a bill that gets to the president's desk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Caitlin. Next, we have Blair Miller.
Hi, Senator. Good morning. Thanks for doing this. So a couple just quick questions. First off, is there any appetite for direct stimulus payments again to American people like we saw earlier this year? And secondly, we talk about, having another bill, a couple of months down the road during a Biden administration, but that was the same thing that we all talked about, this March and April. So what is the thought and the feeling, at least on your behalf, of what the Senate would accomplish, especially depending on what happens in Georgia and what McConnell will do under a Biden administration?
Well, on the first point, I have not seen a movement toward the individual payments. I don't think that would be a bad thing for us to do at all. I think people could use it, but if the focus is on strengthening unemployment insurance, that's where we might get the most bipartisan support right now. So we'll just have to see it as the week develops. And then I don't know what effect the Georgia races will have on our ability to do another one of these packages in the spring. There's gonna be a lot that changes between now and January 20th when President Biden takes office. And I hope that what we will see is kind of a return to normalcy and a turning the page on chaos. I can't tell you what a pleasure it was to talk to the Biden transition people on COVID this week and hearing such knowledgeable people who care a lot about the American people, who are thinking through all of the ways to try to get the vaccine to the most number of people most quickly. And the difference between that conversation and conversation with the Trump administration, which was always about, I don't know, it's not our issue, the governors are the ones in charge, not even attempting to have a national strategy. So I think that while things are going to get worse from the perspective of the number of people that are infected and the economy slowing down as a result of that, if we can put a floor underneath the economy and make strides toward the vaccine, I think we'll all take a look in late January and decide what needs to be done then. And I think it's too hard to predict today. And my hope is that we will have a set of conditions then that are going to make people want to act in good faith for the first time in a long time, and do the work the American people need us to do.
Thanks, Senator.
Thanks.
Thanks, Blair. Last, we have Tamara Chung with the Colorado Sun.
Senator, thanks for taking our questions. I had two. The first one, I know that you've always been pushing sort of a stimulus plan that's tied into the economy and how that's going. What sort of support did you see for that? And do you think that any of that's going to show up in the next plan, relief plan?
I don't think, Tamara, it'll show up in this relief plan. Those are what I call those automatic stabilizers, and they're an effort to try to take the politics out of legislating in these kind of downturns. When I ran for president, I was the only candidate that had a proposal that said, we should tie unemployment benefits, for example, to whether the economy is improving or falling, instead of having these artificial cliffs that make it impossible for people to plan, for governors to plan, and certainly for anybody to plan around the dysfunction of the Congress. We'd be a lot better off if we had a set of benefits like UI, like SNAP, where they kicked in to diminish the economic harm that the downturn would cause and the harm to families that the downturn would cause, and allowed us to accelerate more quickly out of the downturn, and as a result of not having to go through the political dysfunction. So I don't think we're going to get that done in the next week. I do think that it is possible with the new administration that we look to this as a new way of financing these kinds of downturns. We've been through the two worst recessions since the Great Depression in the last 12 years, and we can be sure there are going to be more to come. And I think we should be better prepared, take the politics out of it, and we should have a substantive debate about what the right level of benefits is and how to best help the economy most rapidly return to full strength, because that's what we all need. And that's the same reason, by the way, I've been pushing the health force so hard. It's that I think we've had this sort of false choice or false dichotomy all along about protecting the public health on the one hand and protecting our economy on the other, and the two go hand in hand. They are absolutely linked. If we have a robust public health system that can do contact tracing, that can do vaccination, it's much more likely that we're not only going to be able to open schools and businesses, but that we'll be able to keep them open, even when we still have the virus around us. What was your second question, Tamara?
Well, the second question is actually on unemployment and the extended benefits that ended, which actually do seem to be tied into the economy, because, for Colorado, it dropped off in early November. So that's why the state extended benefits ended last weekend.
Right.
I know, with what the state legislature did this week to adopt that new second trigger, it seems like the issue now is that there's a 13-week pause, and whether Colorado can actually make use of that extended benefit trigger and, retroactively return to the program. I'm wondering, have you heard from the Department of Labor on this yet?
Yeah, we worked really closely with them. I'm so glad they did. They've managed to make a change that I think is going to allow about 16,000 people to stay on unemployment who wouldn't otherwise have been able to do it. But they can't do the gig worker extension. We have to do that in Washington. They can't do the federal reimbursement part of this, which means, and that may go to the the retroactivity question that you have, the federal government was reimbursing 100% of these extensions, and as long as we're in that in this kind of an emergency, I think we should still be doing that. So that's part of the extension as well. So there are kind of three different pieces of this. One is the bigger universe. One is the amount of time, the 6 months to 9 months, and then the other is the reimbursement of the federal government by the federal government to state governments. And then there's, of course, the issue of what is the amount going to be? It's got to, there's some of us that have argued for 600. There are others that have left it at 0. And we're undoubtedly going to end up somewhere in between that. But there's no doubt in my mind that the need is there. I mean, unemployment claims in Colorado, just alone, as you know, I'm sure you've been covering this, are up 12% week over week. Last week, there's no reason to think that that's not going to continue through the holidays, tragically. And so, I hope we get back there next week, sharpen our pencils, get a bill passed, get it to the president's desk, and put a floor underneath the American people so they can get through this really tough winter, and then hopefully get us to a spring that looks much, much brighter.